Hello, good day. I am Vince Macron Macarandan, and today we will discuss about the fallacy of suppressed evidence, composition, and division. Before we start, we must define first what is fallacy as a form of review. So, fallacy is a defect in an argument that could consist in something other than false premises alone. So, a fallacy is there's a something mistake in an argument using the incorrect claim or premises that leads to a different conclusion, which the premises and conclusion are not being connected. So, the fallacy refers to an argument that is invalid and false. So, in this discussion, we have three objectives. First is to define the fallacy of suppressed evidence. The second part is to understand the fallacy of composition, and the third part is to understand the fallacy of division. So, as a form of review, we must review about the cogent argument, which defined as an inductive argument with good reasoning and premises. So an inductive argument is from general to specific an argument. So from as a whole and to a specific thing. So in that case, we can say that it is a valid or a cogent argument if the premises and the conclusion of the argument is clear and logical. So as he added, the proviso that premises not ignore some important piece of evidence that outweighs the presented evidence and entails a very different conclusion. So it clearly states here that a cogent argument or a valid argument is not ignoring the evidence or the premises, and not present an evidence or ignores or different conclusion or draw a different conclusion. So we will start with the discussion about the fallacy of suppressed evidence. So the fallacy of suppressed evidence happens if an inductive argument does indeed ignore such evidence. So it's something to do with the disregarding or ignoring the stronger evidence of an argument and drew a different conclusion. For example, for the first example, most dogs are friendly and pose no threat to people who pet them. Therefore, it would be safe to pet the little dog that is approaching us now. So if we examine this example, we can see the premise or the first premise, which is the most dogs are friendly and pose no threat to people who pet them, is really true since it is observable right now. So the trick here or the problem here is the drawing conclusion. So it concludes that it would be safe to pet the little dog that is approaching us now, which it is not a guarantee that all dogs that is approaching us now is safe. So in this example, it ignores the fact that there is a that possibility that this little dog uh, have rabies. If it bites someone, it really affects the health of someone. So it ignores the negative effect or the negative features of these dogs and conclude that different conclusion. So in this argument, it shows that it is uh, sounds correct, but if we examine it correctly, it is not. There's a problem here, especially in the conclusion part. So it is a suppressed evidence. For the second example, the ad for Kentucky Fried Chicken say, buy a bucket of chicken and have a barrel of fun. Therefore, if we buy a bucket of the chicken, we will be granted to have a lots of fun. So another example of fallacy of suppressed evidence. Since we can also examine that the first sentence tells about it is true. So buy a bucket of chicken and have a barrel of fun. It is a stronger evidence. But the the conclusion is draw the conclusion or the inference of this argument draws differently. So there's no guarantee that if we buy a bucket of the chicken, we can experience a lot of fun. In this case, it ignores the negative features of that product, which is the presence of fat in the chicken, which this fat really will really affect the health of person, especially once the fats uh, brings into the body of a person, it leads to obesity, or it leads to experience uh, the health health problems. Okay. Okay, for this third example is during the past 60 years, Poland has enjoyed rather low standard living. Therefore, Poland will probably have a low standard of living for the next 60 years. So in this example is the fallacy, or the example, the first premise, it is true, it is observable. So Poland has enjoyed a rather low standard living. So there are many witnesses here, there, about this statement. But here the problem is the conclusion. So there's no such evidence, or there we cannot say that after next 60 years we can say that Poland will remain its low standard living. So in that case, the conclusion ignores the stronger evidence, and it ignores the possibility that the Poland will have a high standard living for the next 60 years. Okay, let us proceed to the fallacy of composition. So, the fallacy of composition is committed when the conclusion of an argument depends on the erroneous transference of an attribute from the parts of something onto the whole. So, it's something to do with from from specific to as a whole. So, the fallacy of composition occurs when there is the transfer of attributes of a specific thing transferred improperly into the whole, which affects the argument, the the credibility of the argument, so the validity of the argument. So for example, Maria likes anchovies. She likes chocolate ice cream. Therefore, it is certain that she would like a chocolate sundae topped with anchovies. So we can say that this argument, or this example, uh, it stated two likes of Maria, which is she likes anchovies and she likes an ice cream. So it is acceptable. But the tricky here is the conclusion, which these two likes of Maria has been combined to a one food, which is a chocolate sundae topped with anchovies, which there's no such evidence, or we cannot say that if we combine these two likes of Maria, she would like this food. Yeah. So that's how the composition, which the specific attributes of something is bring transferred to as a whole. So we cannot say there is no such evidence. So it is a fallacy of composition. However, not every such transferences is illegitimate. So there are also argument or statement that is valid. For example, every atom in this teacup has mass. Therefore, this teacup has mass. So it is true. Since every atom in this teacup has mass. So, therefore, this teacup has mass. So it is a valid argument. So let us proceed between the confusion between composition and hasty generalization. So the composition proceeds from the members of the class to the class itself. So it is only exclusive into the class itself. So, and the conclusion of the fallacy of composition is a class statement. So, a class statement is something connected to the attribute is predicated collectively, which is assigned not to the individual but to a class as a whole. Okay. For example, less fuel is consumed by a car than by a fire truck. Therefore, less fuel consumed in the United States by cars than by fire truck. So, in this example, we can say that uh, it talks about the which of these cars consume less fuel. So it mentions here two specific cars, I mean the car and the fire truck. So therefore, less fuel consumed in the United States by cars than by fire truck. The conclusion is concluding that cars consume less fuel than by fire truck and the United States. The problem here is it ignores the other cars, that there are some cars that consume less fuel, not only limited in these two specific things. So, so it is a fallacy of the composition. While the fallacy of hasty generalization is focused on it proceeds from the specific to general, and the conclusion is a general statement. Okay. So from specific to general. So a general statement refers to the attribute is predicated distributively to each and every member of a class. Okay. So that is the difference of hasty generalization and composition. So the composition refers to uh, the composition proceeds from the members of the class to the class itself, while the hasty generalization proceeds from specific to general. Okay, let us proceed to the fallacy of division. The fallacy of division is committed when the conclusion of an argument depends on the erroneous transference of an attribute from a whole or class onto its parts for members. So, it is clear that the fallacy of division is the opposite of the fallacy of composition. Since the fallacy of composition is from the specific to into a whole, while the fallacy of division is talks about the attribute from a whole class onto its part. So division is the attribute of this specific thing has been transferred improperly to a whole or a class. So the fallacy of division occurs. For example, salt is non-poisonous compound. Therefore, its component elements, sodium and chlorine, are non-poisonous. So, we can examine here the example that salt is the wholeness of a salt is non-poisonous compound. So, it is from a whole. And the conclusion is uh, differently conveyed. It talks about the elements, the component elements of a salt, which is the sodium and chlorine, and it also concluded that these elements is non-poisonous, which is false. We cannot compare the attributes of the attributes of this wholeness of thing to its specific elements, which is sodium and chlorine. So this is a fallacy of composition, the transfer of the attribute of a salt, which is non-poisonous compound, to its specific elements, which is sodium and chlorine, which we all know that this sodium and chlorine is poisonous. So it is a fallacy. However, not every such transferences is illegitimate. There are also transferences is legitimate. For example, this teacup has mass. Therefore, the atoms that compose this teacup has mass. It is true. It is acceptable and valid. It is clear. Okay, let us proceed to the confusion between division and accident. So, division proceeds from the class to specific. And the premises contain a class statement, which is a statement that the attribute is predicated collectively, which is assigned not to the individual but to a class as a whole. Okay. So proceeds from the class to specific. So it only focus on the class itself. And this attribute is uh, collectively predicated to the specific members of the class. Okay. For example, stainless steamers have almost disappeared. The car is a stainless steamer. Therefore, this car has almost disappeared. So, stainless steamers is is the wholeness or the type is a type of class of the car which attributed or described that is almost disappeared. So, in the second premise, it mentions a specific example, which is the car. The car is a stainless steamer. So therefore, this car has almost disappeared. So it is a fallacy because the improper transferred of the attributes of the wholeness, the attributes of the whole of the wholeness of the thing towards the specific thing. While the accidents uh, proceeds from general to specific, and the premises contain a general statement, which a statement that attribute is predicated distributively to each and every member of a class. So it is called a distributive predication. So the fallacy of composition refers to the proceeds from a class to specific, while the accidents proceeds from general to specific. Okay. So, in conclusion, the fallacy of suppressed evidence commonly appears in inferences by ignoring the evidence of an inductive argument. So, the suppressed evidence, it's all about ignoring the stronger evidence of an argument and draws a different conclusion because it ignores the important piece of an argument. So, the suppressed evidence, the error happened in the argument, the error, the suppressed evidence occurs on mostly in the concluding part or drawing a conclusion. Okay, and then the fallacy of composition division are classified as fallacies of grammatical analogy because of the structural similarity between arguments that do and do not commit these fallacies. So, as a review, the fallacy of composition is from uh, specific to general or from specific unto the whole or something whole. And then the fallacy of division is uh, the from a whole to specific. And it talks about the improper transfer of the attributes of a thing. So the fallacy of composition is the attributes of the specific thing improperly transferred to something whole. And the fallacy of division is the the improper transfer of the attributes of the wholeness of a thing into its specific parts. So that's how the fallacy of suppressed evidence and composition and division occurs. Once again, I am Vince Macron Macarandan, and thank you for listening.